Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a workshop on GRE preparation. Some of you might have attended our workshop yesterday on GMAT preparation. And so this is sort of a new series that we've started where we're also expanding the kind of workshop that we do at Project EduAccess. My name is Ms. Pan. I'm just going to sort of do a little bit of introduction and then hand it over to our wonderful speakers today. Before I give you the outline of the session, I just want to let you know that the meeting is being recorded, and we will the format of the session is that we will first have a presentation by the speakers, which will be followed by questions from the audience. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in chat and we'll be sure to take them during the Q&A part. And during the Q&A part, since the session is being recorded, if you want to appear in the recording, then you can raise your hand and we'll call upon you to speak. Otherwise, you can put your question in chat. And if you are more comfortable sending it personally, you can send it to me on chat personally. Great. So just a little bit of what we'll be doing today. We'll begin by I'll start by introducing Project EduAccess. I'll introduce you to the panelists that we have today. Then we'll introduce you to the GRE. We'll discuss the components of the test. We'll discuss the scoring method. We'll talk about sort of whether you need to take the test or not. What is the sort of requirement? We discuss the timeline of when you start preparing for the test, when you take it, and what happens after. We'll discuss a little bit on approaches to preparing for the test. We'll discuss with you some of the resources that our panelists sort of referred to when they were preparing for their GRE, and then some advice for you from our speakers, and then we move to questions. Okay, so for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, we are Project EduAccess. We organize sort of these online workshops, and we also run a graduate mentorship program. The idea behind Project EduAccess is that we all believe that access to higher education is a privilege that most people from marginalized communities are denied or don't have access to. And so through Project EduAccess, we are trying to sort of create more inclusivity by removing barriers to sort of for marginalized communities in South Asia. And so, like I said, we try to do this through expert mentorship by these sessions that we're running online as well. Today, we're joined by three very wonderful panelists. We have with us Juhi, who is pursuing her master's in international affairs at Columbia University. We are joined by Balsher, who's a senior climate researcher at Risk Thinking AI, and Namita, who is doing her master's in public administration at the School of Economics. Before I hand it over to Juhi to start the presentation, maybe the three of you could quickly maybe say hi and also just say what languages you speak along with English, just in case any mentee would, would like to ask their question in that language. Juhi, and then Namita, and then Balsher.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Juhi, and I speak English and Hindi. Unfortunately, I don't know any other language. I can sort of understand Punjabi, but I'm mostly comfortable with English and Hindi.
Hi, all.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, hi, nice to meet everyone. My name is Balsher, and I speak Hindi, Punjabi, English, and I assume equally fluently, but we'll see. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Namita, and I also speak English, Hindi, and a little bit of Punjabi for all the diversity. This is a very specific panel. But yeah, that's what.
That's fine. I can speak English, Hindi, and Kashmiri, so a little bit of that was sitting there in case someone is interested in asking a question in Kashmiri. But yes, now we'll start with the presentation. Juhi, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Uh, yes, thanks, Mispa. So, like introduction to GRE, so basically GRE, as we all know, stands for Graduate Record Exam, and it's a requirement to get admission to various graduate programs across the world. Um, to very simply put it, it tests your critical thinking skills, your command over English language, your vocabulary, and also your quantitative ability. It's a multiple choice based test, and it's offered it's offered paper based also and computer based, but again it depends on your university how they want you to um, give the test. A lot of them, due to the pandemic, are also allowing paper based tests, but mostly the most accepted is the computer based test. Now, why do colleges want you to take the GRE? I think that is one thing that at least I thought about it a lot when I was preparing for it, and essentially it just brings about the semblance of parity when it comes to comparing applicants, because there's so much diversity, and also it is a way for colleges to see if you are if you will be able to deal with the rigors of your graduate studies. So that is about the general GRE. ETS, the institution which conducts the GRE, also offers subject specific GRE. So right now only three are offered: maths, psychology, and physics. And all, like, the details of it are available on the ETS website. You can just Google it, your subject GRE, and they'll tell you the syllabus, the marking scheme, and everything else. So yeah, it's a very simple Google search. Mispa, can we move to the next slide? Thank you. So now coming to the components of the general GRE test, there are three sections. The first is analytical writing. To simply put it, it is the essay section. You will have to write two essays in it, and it'll be 30 minutes each. The next is the verbal reasoning section, which is the English section that tests your vocabulary and your comprehension skills. There'll be about two to three sections. And then is quantitative reasoning, which is like the math section that tests your ability to analyze data and just your general quantitative aptitude. That's what it tests. And that's also about two to three sections of that, depending on the test. Next. Yes, so coming on to analytical writing, which is the essay section. So now you'll be given 30 minutes per section, and this is the first section that comes when you're giving the GRE. So usually the first analytical writing question that they ask you is analyze an issue, and the next one is analyze an argument. So, in analyze an issue, basically, they'll give you a statement or a paragraph, and you have to decide whether you agree with that statement or disagree. And then you have to map out your entire essay explaining why you agree or disagree with it. Then comes your argument. Now, in analyze an argument, they'll give you a paragraph which will be very flawed. It'll have a lot of loopholes, and it'll not generally make sense. In this section, you have to figure out whatever those loopholes are and sort of give your criticism, your arguments as to why the reasoning that has been given in that statement is wrong, and you have to give your suggestions. So these are the two main essays that you'll have to write. Now, coming on to the structure. basically, generally that's what I followed, because it was really easy to map out my essay. Was first you'll have your main introductory paragraph, then 2 to 3 body paragraphs where you give your analysis, your reasoning, and finally end it with a conclusion. You should aim at 350 to 500 words for it to be a really good essay and to get good marks. Two things that I feel people have a problem with is, number one, time crunch, because in 30 minutes you're supposed to map out your entire structure and type it, which brings me to my second point, is your typing speed. Because it'll be based, like it's a computer based test, you need to be really comfortable with typing, with the keyboard. So just mapping it with a pencil and paper is not enough. You'll have to practice your writing, your typing, sorry. So for that, I would recommend that you, whenever you're practicing your analytical writing section, please do it on your word pad, because that's the closest you'll come to what you'll face during the GRE. To begin with analytical writing section, I would suggest that you go. So ETS has this free resource available on its website, where it gives a whole pool of questions for analyzing an issue as well as analyzing an argument. Pick any one topic and just take a pencil and paper and try to make a rough outline of the same before you start writing, because once you have everything on paper, it becomes easier to type. So that's how I would suggest that you start. But yes, the only way to get good marks in this is to practice, practice, and practice. Yes, Ms. Next slide, please. Yeah, coming so to the verbal reasoning section. So again, this is the English section. You'll have about 2 to 3 sections. So generally in a GRE, I forgot to mention it before. The basic structure would be that you have one analytical writing section and then 6 sections of verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. 2 verbal reasoning sections will be there, which will be scored. You might get a third section, but that could be either quantitative reasoning or verbal reasoning. So anyway, each section will be 30 minutes. The first, so since there'll be 20 questions, there'll be about 6 questions based on text completion, 4 on sentence equivalence, and about 10 on reading comprehension. Text completion and sentence equivalence are basically fill in the blanks. The only difference is that in text completion, there can be 2, 3, or even 4 blanks in the sentence, whereas in sentence equivalence, there is generally only one blank, and basically they're looking at you to select a word which will tie together the whole sentence. For these two, you need to have a very good command over your vocabulary. I understand that it might not be a strong suit for everyone, but one good thing is that GRE is very consistent in the type of words that they ask questions about. Like, for example, when I was going through the sample papers, I realized that um, there wasn't a lot of diversity in the words that were asked in terms of vocabulary. So if you practice a lot, you will be very easily able to answer these answer questions based on text completion and sentence equivalence. For this, I would recommend the Magoosh app. It's free. It's available on App Store and the Play Store. And just keep going through the words again and again. That's the only thing that will help you, is your consistency in going through those words. And as far as reading comprehension is concerned, all of us have given tests where reading comprehension based questions have been asked. It is really easy to deal with reading comprehension. a few things to keep in mind while while answering questions based on reading comprehension is that first, try not to get overwhelmed because it is easy. It's the Magoosh app. We'll discuss it later. Uh, Towards the end, we will be discussing the resources, so please don't worry. Anyway, so for the reading comprehension, try to pay attention to whatever you're reading. Do not please look at the timer. It is easy to get scared and overwhelmed. And also, while selecting your while selecting which option to choose, try to see if you can point out the answer in the paragraph as well. Like, for example, if you're given a question and A, B, C, D are your choices, you should see, is the A option even there mentioned somewhere in the comprehension passage? So that's what I used to do. Like, if I couldn't point it out in the comprehension passage, then that would not be the option. Again, practice and consistency, but it's not very difficult. And with a lot of practice, you can do these questions very easily. Yeah. That's about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Juhi. So coming to the quantitative reasoning now, the level of the maths is around 10th to 12th grade math. So why are they asking us these questions and what are they testing? They're testing both accuracy but also speed. So these are not questions which are very difficult per se, but it's about how you can approach them in very limited time and under pressure. So if you spent around 5 to 7 minutes on each question, all of you would get it. But it's about how to find the best approach to each question such that you are minimizing the time on each question. And that's the approach you should take for quantitative reasoning. In terms of the topics that they cover, it's a broad range. So there's fractions, decimals and percentages, geometry, numbers and number lines, comparisons, statistics, and data interpretations. And in some cases, they have word problems. So the same topics, but made into a word problem. So these are all basic topics that we've all come across. But like I said, it's about how you approach each question. What I did for quantitative reasoning was across these focus areas. When I gave my mock exams, I tried to figure out which of these areas are my strengths and weaknesses. For the areas where I felt I was relatively more comfortable with how to approach the problems, I tried to maximize the speed. So you do as many questions and you focus on reducing the speed. And for my weak areas, where I felt like either I didn't understand the concept too well, or where I felt the concept was fine, but I was either making silly errors, or I wasn't able to understand how to apply the same concept to different problems, I tried to understand the approach behind the question. But then I was able to remember during the exam which of them are my weak areas, so that I'm not wasting too much time on it. So after spending the first 10 seconds when you're reading the question, you get an understanding of which focus area it is in and how comfortable you are with the question. And that dictates the approach during the exam. And it's a much quicker process because you don't have that much time to sit and think through everything. But the more you practice, the more comfortable you get with deciding how to prioritize questions, because you can always come back in the GRE. So on the computer-based test, you can go through within each section. You can go to questions further and then always come back to older questions. So try to prioritize the questions which are your strengths. Do that with maximum accuracy and minimum speed. And then if you have time left in that section, you can spend a little more time on your weak areas. And for all these three sections, I think I saw a comment about the structure. Yes, the GRE keeps changing and tweaking a little bit. So I would suggest to look at the ETS guide, which is most recent and which will be on their website, which is available for free, which will give you the exact details on some things you should remember is the number of sections, the time for each section, the number of questions in each section. And these things might be tweaked, so just be a little bit mindful of that. Can you go to the next one? Yeah, so scoring method, also something to just make sure that you are verifying with the most recent version of the GRE. The verbal and quant is on a scale of 130 to 170. So what you get is after you've answered all your questions, you get a raw score. And then depending on the difficulty of your questions, it is scaled between 130 to 170. So if you have no answers correct, you will get a 130. And then as you answer more questions, it keeps increasing in 1 point increments. So you don't get half points at all. It keeps increasing in 1 point increments. And the maximum you can score on either verbal or quant is 170. And then you get a collective score for both of these sections. The analytical writing score is not a part of this score. So the score of 340 that you're marked out of is only for verbal and quant. There is equal weightage to all questions, but it's adaptive marking, which means that after you've answered one particular section, whether it's the first section can be verbal or quant, depending on how you've scored, your next section, the difficulty of the next section changes. So if you've on your first section scored very well, then the next section will be more difficult, but that is taken into account in your final score, which is scaled. So if on your next section, which is more difficult, you've not done as well, the scoring will take into account the fact that it was a difficult section. But if in your first section, you've not scored so well, the second section will be easier, which means you can score more. But again, that will reflect in the final scaled score. But that's not something you should think about while you're doing the exam or actually approaching the test. That's just to understand how the scoring works. When you're taking mocks, look at the raw score. And that's generally a very good indication of what your final score will be. But so you don't need to think about the adaptive marking when actually giving the test. And very importantly, there is no negative marking. So try and approach and answer all questions, or at least make an attempt to answer all questions. Prioritize the ones where you're sure, because you can come back to them. And then before the section timer ends, if you still have time, just mark, at least attempt to mark all the questions. Analytical writing is on a scale of 0 to 6, and you get this in half point increments. So it's possible to have a 4.55. The average is around 4, and then you get scaled up as depending on the quality of your answer. And like I said, go over the official GRE practice test. There is a booklet that they have, which gives you information on all of the sections in terms of their the details of the section. And very importantly, they give a breakdown of each type of section and question. So all the things that we've gone through in terms of topics as well, they break each of them down and they tell you what they're expecting in each section, what kinds of questions you can get. And they give you sample questions and answers for each kind of question. And they tell you how to approach it. This, in my opinion, was a very good starting point for me to understand how to approach each kind of question and what they are expecting from the test, because it shapes the way you're thinking about every question. So I would very highly recommend for that to be the first thing you do when you start thinking about the GRE, is to thoroughly go through that practice test booklet. Yeah, can you go to the next one? Okay, so yeah, to take a step back to even think about whether you need to take the test or not, check the course requirement page for the relevant courses that you want to apply to. It'll be one of 3 things. Either the page will say that a GRE is mandatory, in which case you should definitely give the GRE, or it can say that it is recommended, or it might not be mentioned at all. Now, what to do when it's either recommended or not mentioned? If they say that it is recommended, it is generally strongly suggested that you do give the test. But of course, this depends on your profile. If you feel like you are not good at taking tests and you think that your profile in other ways is much more suited for the course, and your GRE score is not something that's going to boost, but maybe might not reflect well on the profile, then that's a subjective call that you can take on whether you want to give the GRE or not. But if it is not mentioned at all, you can still use the test to make up for certain aspects of your profile. So for example, if you are applying for a course that requires quantitative skills, but your profile otherwise is not quant heavy, your undergraduate degree did not allow you to showcase your quantitative skills, then you can still take the GRE, and that score can reflect the fact that you are comfortable with certain quantitative aspects. And similarly, vice versa with maybe verbal skills. If your undergrad degree was more quant heavy, you can take the GRE to showcase that you have verbal skills, and that can always boost up your profile, whether the GRE is recommended or not mentioned at all. But within these two, whether it's recommended or not mentioned, just check if they have any specifications on GRE or GMAT. Because if nothing is mentioned, then it's worthwhile to take a look on which one you think will be more beneficial, because they do, while they're very similar in certain aspects, they have certain specific focus areas, and a little more stress on certain aspects. And so it might be beneficial to see which one you think is more beneficial for the course that is required and for what aspects of your resume need to be strengthened.
Okay, with that out of the way, let's discuss how to prepare for the test. So the timeline that you should set for yourself, it varies from person to person for sure. So I was trained as an engineer. I had physics, chemistry, maths during my high school and secondary school. So for me, it was more about preparing for English rather than maths or analytical skills. But if you are more comfortable with your English skills, you may want to spend more time practicing analytics. Like it says, the score is valid for a few years. Again, always check the ETS website to see what the most recent rules and regulations are. But it is colloquially said that more recent scores are favorable. So there are two approaches that you can take to sitting for the exam. You can either tie it up with your graduate school application, or you could take the way I approached it, which may not be the most popular, but I thought I'll get it out of the way and then focus on my graduate application without any disruptions. So I sat for my GRE, I think in August or September of the year that I was applying. So my applications were in November, December. So I got the GRE out of the way. Some people even do it earlier. There are two reasons for that. One is you get a chance to, you don't have to worry about it, but also you get a chance to retake it if for some reason you're not able to perform on that day. It might be an unpopular opinion, but I believe GRE is like a gatekeeper exam. It doesn't really test as much analytics or verbal skills as they want you to believe. And like any other exam, it is, because of this, I believe it is hackable. So I have some techniques that we can discuss. So yeah, in terms of prep time, 2 to 3 months at least. 4 to 5 hours is a good spot. For me, it was mostly about looking through word lists, reading essays and stuff like that. And if you want, you could probably start maybe 5 to 6 months before the date that you want to take the exam and start looking at material out there, start collecting stuff, talk to people who have already given the exam, talk to them about things that they would have done differently, stuff like that, and come for workshops like these. Again, take breaks in between because it can get very repetitive. I was going through word lists and it can get very boring because those words are so archaic, no one uses them today. Like my vocabulary probably hit a peak during GRE, and then I've been in Canada ever since, but I've never used those words. So those words probably won't help you after the GRE, but you do need to go through the loops, as I say, for this exam. So Ms. Bab, next slide, please. Yeah, like I said, customize it according to your needs and abilities. One thing you could do is take a mock test. There are multiple websites. Note that not all of them may have the same rigor or the standard questions as GRE, but they will give you a rough idea of where you stand. So taking those mock exams can be a good way to gauge how much time you will need to prepare for the actual exam. Also note that some of these websites, their mock exams may be a tad bit difficult just to sort of scare you into buying their products. So in my experience, again, I'm caveating with this with the fact that I sat for my GRE 11 years ago. That was the first year when they shifted to the 340 scoring regime. So some of these mock exams may be a bit too difficult, so don't get dissuaded or discouraged. But those they are a good way to gauge where you stand. Again, leave question room for retaking. If you're applying in October, November, and you're sitting for your GRE in September, I would say that's cutting it a bit too tight. But mileage varies by person. But it's always good to leave some question room. Again, and this unpopular opinion, this is something that I added. Other people may not agree with it. And I think you should just get it out of the way as soon as possible, because it's just a loop you have to go through. It adds nothing, or it adds very little to your actual abilities to prosper or to succeed in graduate school. Next slide, please. Yeah, resources. The ETS website is your source of truth. Everything else is secondary to it. If you have the most latest guide from Kaplan, Princeton Review, all of these fancy places, they are always, the ETS website and the ETS guide always takes precedence over it. So whatever ETS says, that is what you have to follow, regardless of what all the other people or guides or regardless of what anyone else says. ETS website is your primary source of truth, because it changes very frequently. They may not change the primary structure, but they could always add and subtract topics. They could add or subtract the kind of questions they ask. They could tweak the number of questions here and there. So always be sure that you are referring to the website multiple times during your preparation stage, not just you look at it and then you spend 3 months preparing for it, and then when you sit for your exam, you get an unpleasant surprise. So make sure you're referring to the website every week at least when you're sitting for your exam. The official guide from ETS, unfortunately, I don't think it is free. It wasn't free when I sat for my exam. I don't know if it is still the case, but I personally believe it is worth the investment. And then so you should definitely get access to it. Your friends may have it. You could refer to the guide from the previous year. I won't say it's a very, I would say refer to the latest guide if possible. Like it changes again. Like things change very rapidly, so you make sure you have the latest guide or the latest resources at hand. And if you think you've already gone through it, you still have time. There are multiple other private companies which have their own GRE prep resources, both paid and free. Kaplan and Princeton Review were the two that I had access to when I was preparing. And I know that there are a lot of YouTube videos now where they just put the mock exam as a video. And Magoosh app. I haven't used it, but apparently that's all the rage nowadays. So you should look at that as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, 1 to 2 months, I think, is the minimum, frankly. And you should definitely give yourself more cushion room. These 4 target institutions. So this again, it may have changed. So Juhi and Namita, let me know if I'm wrong. But when you give your GRE and when you finish the exam, before you leave the center, you are allowed to enter 4 graduate institutes where you want to send your GRE score, and that is free. So you get 4. You get to send your score, your GRE score, to 4 institutions for free. And anything you do after that, so when you're actually applying and you're selecting institutions, I think there's a fee attached to sending your GRE score. Again, that is why I'm sort of critical of this whole system. It's just a money grab. So do make sure that you have 4 target institutions where you're sure you will apply, just so you don't waste the opportunity to use those 4 options. Institution versus department, this is something that I faced with a couple of universities in the US. Sometimes the university has its GRE requirements standardized across the institution. So you will find more information on the graduate school page of the university. Sometimes departments have their own GRE requirements. And that also means their code and process of submitting, or the code and the scoring that is needed. It may vary from department to department within the same institute. So make sure you have all the knowledge that you need when you go to sit for your exam. Flashcards was something that I used for my preparation. I have it. I still have it as an email somewhere, so I can share it with everyone after this workshop. Next slide, please. I see there are a lot of questions coming in, but we'll take them one by one after this presentation. Oh, there's 4 target institutions already done. Oh yeah, the third point. What if only one or a few of my target institutions require GRE? So this is a very tricky situation that a lot of people are finding themselves in, because given the fact that GRE does not have the best reputation, some institutions are getting rid of it, especially in North America. I'm not sure about Europe. So for example, when I was applying, I applied to institutes in the US where all of them required GRE, but Canadian institutes did not need it. So if you have, let's say, 6 dream universities that you want to apply to, and only one of them requires a GRE, I personally think you could just drop that institute, because going through the whole hassle, it's not worth it. Unless you are really set on going to that one particular institute, that is fine. But you have to weigh the pros and cons of sitting for an exam, which costs money, which is not directly aligned to what you will study in graduate school, and which requires extra preparation, which you could use for your applications otherwise, right? So you're technically using time that you could use in your application, you're using that time to prepare for this exam. So if only 1 or maybe even 2 of your 8 or 9 institutes require it, I would just say drop the institute unless you are very keen on going there. Again, that is just my opinion. Juhi and Namita, if you have something contrary to that, feel free to jump in. You don't have to wait till the end of this presentation. Is there another slide, Misbah, or is that the end? Okay, so before we go into questions, I'm sorry if I could just take a couple of minutes. While this presentation was going on, I was just taking some notes, and they're very unorganized, so I'll quickly go over them. Try to practice your GRE at least 1 or 2 mock exams in the interface that you will have when you are actually sitting for the exam. I believe ETS has that. So you can go to their website, you can sit for a mock exam where you will actually see what you will see in the actual exam. So you'll see the left panel where the text is, you'll have the right panel where you have all the questions. I don't know if it has changed, but when I was sitting for my GRE, I was able to practice GRE in the same, so to say, UI interface. The test changes very frequently, so make sure you are up to date. The questions difficulties vary, so don't get discouraged if you see 2 or 3 questions in rapid succession which you have no idea about. I know that I'm pretty sure I did not get all questions correct, but and again, I don't like the GRE, but I was able to score 335. I know that GRE scores questions based on how many people got it correct. So if a lot of people are getting a question wrong, you may not suffer because of that. Okay, so make sure you don't worry about the difficulty of the questions. Take each question separately and go for it. There are separate scoring requirements for universities. So they have their own quantitative minimum score required, minimum analytical score required. Make sure you know that. There are some questions on analyzing data charts, which is something at least I didn't learn in high school. So our maths syllabus is very rigorous, but we don't get to see data charts and analyzing data and plots. So make sure you practice that. You don't need to know the right answer. You just need to know the right option. And what do I mean by that? There are ways to you can eliminate options. So if there's a quantitative question which relates to some probability or something, instead of trying to solve it algebraically, try to enter the options into the question, and you will see that 2 or 3 of them get eliminated directly. So you don't need to actually solve the question. You just need to find the right option. Some of these questions are multi-option, so there may be more than one answer correct, and you have to get all of them correct to get points, and there's no partial marking. For analytical skills, I was told, and again, this is just something that someone told me, they have a rubric that they use for grading your essays. And what do I mean by rubric? That they don't have a very subjective approach to grading your essay. There are certain points that they're looking for, because these essays are graded, they're not graded by university professors. They are probably people that are outsourced, and they have to grade certain number of essays within a short span of time. So these essays, they are graded based on a rubric. So try to do everything that they want you to do, nothing less or nothing more than that. Okay, if they say 500 words, stick to 500 words. If they want you to criticize an argument that they've provided you, don't go into arguments outside the field. So stick to the task that is given to you. It may get very you may want to add your own views and feelings about it, but unless they ask you to do it, don't do it. If they ask you to do it, then you definitely have to do it. Typing accuracy and speed are very important for the written part of it. So make sure you practice typing as much as you can. The questions are simple, so practice as many as you can. The mathematical theory, you can probably spend 2 or 3 days learning it, but spend a month practicing. So that is the sort of breakdown that I had. Like, practice as many questions as you can. And there are also some research questions when you're doing it. And what I mean by research questions is that they won't tell you, but those questions, they don't add to your score. So ETS just uses those questions to gauge the general level of expertise of the student cohort, and then they may use those questions in the next year. So when you are answering the questions, don't worry if you think that the questions are very difficult. Either no one could be getting them right, or they may just be research-based questions and they won't even affect your score. Again, you don't have to worry about the score. That is something they need to worry about. You just have to sit for the exam, get it out of the way, and then focus on your application. Yeah, those are the unordered list of advice that I had. But again, it was 11 years ago for me, so I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of things. So Juhi and Namita, make sure you jump in when I say something wrong. Thanks.
You covered quite a bit. If we have time, can I add like 2 things, Mispa?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that was I had something written down as well, and that was most of it. I would say just 2 things to add to that is, one, the first thing I did was, after going through the ETS website, is before I started prep, I gave a mock just to understand which areas I'm already naturally, because like these are things you've probably done through your schooling. So just to understand which things you are naturally good at and and which things require more practice. And there will definitely be areas that fall into both these categories. So before I even started my prep, I just gave that mock to identify these areas. It helps, it saves time in knowing which ones you want to spend more time on, or it's just more efficient because you are on a time crunch. So try to do that. That was the most important thing that helped me. And identify, like, I would say, analyze your wrong answers, not just in terms of saying this is wrong, but why you got each answer wrong. And I think that is very important as part of your prep. Every time you solve a question, even if you're not giving a mock, understand, you can break them down into three things. One is, were you completely blank on the question and you had no idea what to do with it? Second is, did you know what to do, but maybe you approached it wrong, either under pressure or you mixed up the concepts? Or the third is, if you just made a silly error and that's why you got it wrong. Because the way you then you go on to correct these questions will be very different. Because the first one, if you were completely blank, you need to go back and revise your concept. The second one, if you know it, but you just got your approach wrong, you need to understand a little bit more about the strategy of how to approach the question, which will come from tips and tricks. And the third is, if it's just a silly mistake, then you just have to be a little bit more mindful when you're reading, which is something I do a lot. I tend to make a lot of silly mistakes. And regarding which books to follow, Balsher is right. They are definitely, nothing is better than the ETS guide. All of these other books will have a little bit more focus on different aspects, and they will be a little bit harder at some times. So one, don't get discouraged. The one thing that I found really helped me is a resource called GRE Prep Club, which is a free website. And we link that. What that does is it pulls all questions from all of these guides. So what you get is a good sampling of different questions across different guides, as well as from the ETS official guide. And it sort of sorts them out, and you can filter questions as per topic and as per difficulty level. So you can target your prep after you've given your first mock. If you've identified, I am not good at geometry, you can go to the GRE Prep Club website, filter out geometry questions, start with easy, then go on to medium. And then when you want to finally test, you can go on to the hard questions, but always the hard questions are probably much harder than the ones you will actually face on the GRE. But it helps you sort of narrow down your prep as per specific topics and difficulty levels. Take as many mocks as you can. The order of prep that I would say that worked for me is to focus on the concept first and understand what they want. Then focus on just accuracy, getting problems right. Then start doing timed practice. So after you've understood how to get the questions right, try and minimize the time, and then do timed mocks. Don't fret by the timer, but also be mindful of it. It's a fine balance that you have to take, because you can't spend too much time on one question. So have an estimate of how many seconds you want to spend on each question, and be mindful of that. But don't let the clock scare you, and just don't fear the exam, because I know people who will, you are smart, you will give the GRE, but under pressure, it tends to get to you. So just try and stay calm in the moment. And that's what helped me at least, is the GRE, just be a little bit more comfortable and to get the fear out of my head. Yeah, that's all for me.
Yeah, I would just like to add one last thing is that please try to narrow down the resources that you refer. That was something that I was very clear about, because there's a wealth of information available on the internet, and it's easy to get overwhelmed and sort of, I feel that you would be all over the place. So try to narrow down, like that's what I did for, suppose, like my analytical writing. I was very clear that there was only this one, suppose, like YouTube video that I wanted to refer to. I would not be seeing anything else. For my vocabulary, I refer to the Magoosh app. That's it. And for my quant, I think I referred to available. I think I had the Kaplan guide. That's all that I refer to. And yes, of course, ETS is your main gospel. So please be very, like, any preparation that you do should be done according to the ETS, but please narrow down your resources so that it's easy for you. Everything is generally talking about the same thing. You will not be missing out on any important concepts or anything like that. Yeah, that's all from me.
Can I add 2 more points? Yeah,
Yes,
so
yes.
when I was doing my PhD, I was a part of the admission committee at my university. And I wasn't a part of the actual deliberations, but when I talked to the professors informally, I didn't come across anyone who was a very big fan of GRE, to be honest. Okay. They use it as some universities are getting rid of it. Like I said, some of them use it as a minimum standard that you just have to cross. Okay. So like if they say you need a 320, what's this 340, right? Yeah, if you need a 320 and you get a 325 versus you get a 327, it doesn't matter. So make sure you know what you are targeting. Some universities may actually have a very low bar and you don't even need to worry too much about it. If you get a very good score, it would of course stand out. Like the whole admission process is pretty subjective, but don't fret too much if your score is not like stellar. It is just one of the loopholes that you have to go through. Your essays and your SOPs and your recommendations, those are the things that actually matter the most in your application. So don't worry too much if you don't do the best. Just make sure you're meeting the minimum standards or the criteria that each of your institutes or departments have. And especially for the quantitative and the verbal reasoning part, so the multiple the MCQs, it would be nice if you can leave 2 minutes at the end just to revise them, because sometimes you may just have skipped a question for no reason. You may have clicked on next 2 times, and that is one of the easiest ways to lose points. So make sure try to have at least a minute and a half at the end just to make sure you have answered all the questions. And also you will have your English exam to prepare for, TOEFL or IELTS. This GRE prep will help you with that as well. So all is not waste when it comes to spending time on GRE prep. The English requirements for GRE are a lot more stringent than TOEFL or IELTS. So if you're preparing for GRE, that will help with your English standard exam as well. If you're giving that, I'm not sure how many people actually have to go through that today. Yeah. Sorry, this was a long time ago, so I'm just remembering stuff. But thank you for your patience.
No, thank you so much to the three of you. It's been really wonderful to hear about your experience and your tips and tricks for preparing for the exam. I think now we can move on to the question and answer bit. I know a lot of already asked a lot of questions in chat. If anyone has any question that they want to directly ask, so you can raise your hand and sort of put your question to the speaker. Otherwise, you can put it in chat and we'll get to it. Since one of the first things that came up in chat was about the new format or the new structure for GRE, I'll just sort of reiterate that something that all three of them have spoken about, which is that the GRE structure keeps changing and there are tweaks that happen every year. So it's good to keep yourself updated by looking at the website. And it has changed for 2023 as well. And so if from September 2023 onwards, if you're taking the test, it'll be a slightly different format. So do look at the website to sort of get a sense of what those changes are. Then someone has asked, would you recommend at-home testing facility of GRE? What could be the possible cons of it?
I mean, I took it at the test center. I would say the couple of considerations for the at-home test facility is one, obviously network connectivity, because if you have a problem with your network, then they will not refund your test money. You would have spent time and then you have to get a new date. So definitely very big factor. If the same thing happens at a test center, they will take care of it. The other thing is jitters. If you do feel very strongly that going to a test center adds a lot of extra pressure and you would perform significantly better at home, then you could choose to do otherwise. So it is very personal. I do still think that there is value in going to the test center because there's a lot of things that they take care of. Yeah.
Great. Someone is asking, how many words would you recommend learning for the GRE and how many mocks should you take before the test? And do you have any recommendations for the mocks?
In terms of words, I think it's two things. One is your long-term vocabulary, which you learn over the years. So that is pretty consistent and you can't change it over 3 months. But in terms of some of these, learning these words by heart, I think I had a list of 400 or something, 400 or 500. I have those flashcards. I'm happy to share it with everyone. But some guides also have, I remember they had 4,000 words, which I think is not manageable. I would never do that. It's not worth it. But yeah. And I also remember out of those 400 or 500 words, I think there were 4 or 5 that showed up, which is a big ratio, I would say. Like English probably has 100,000 words, and out of those 400, someone selected, 4 showed up in the exam. So that's a good ballpark for me, at least. I don't know, Juhi, Namita, if you want to add to it. How many mock exams? As many as you can. Honestly, those mock exams will actually help you more than reading a new guide, I would say, because the topics are the same. It's just getting used to the kind of questions that show up.
Yeah, for the number of questions, yeah, I agree. I mean, at some point you will have to place a limit because there's only so much your brain can take. Even if you want to do lesser words, maybe just make sure you are comfortable with those words, because often it is very contextual. So a word can have several different meanings in different contexts, and that is something that the GRE tries to test as well. So make sure even if you're learning 100 less words, you know exactly how to use the word and in what context, and be more comfortable with the word. The Magoosh app is a great resource because it gamifies the whole vocabulary experience. So you're not just looking at a list of words and trying to remember what the word means. It gives you the word meaning, it puts it in a sentence context, and then you can sort of play games with it in terms of answering it and then revising it. So it's a great way to just sort of get your brain moving. And what I would do is I would obviously have targeted prep topics each day, but this vocabulary app, I would just take, if nothing else, 15 minutes every day in the morning just to go through some words, so that it's more constant, because you can't cram that in a certain number of days.
Yeah, that's what I also did. Of course, like Balsher mentioned, he had like 400 words and everything. But so that was my target as well. But I obviously knew that I couldn't memorize or, remember so many words. So my aim was that I should be really confident with 150 to 200 words. And what I tried to do was I tried to relate a lot of words together because they were just different words, but their meanings were the same. So that is another strategy that I used. And like Namita mentioned, the Magoosh app is really good. And even I would do that. Like if I was traveling in the metro or something, I would just quickly go through that app. And just my aim was that every day I had to look through words at least for 20 minutes. And another thing that you can do is maybe try to make a story around it, try to relate the words to a particular event or something like that. Like, for example, gregarious, it means someone who's very sociable or a party animal, so to say. So I sort of, like associated it like that Greg is a party animal. So, gregarious, Greg, just a very simple sort of way to, like, that's, try to make it as interesting as possible for you, because it gets really boring after a while and your mind sort of just goes numb with all the information that you have. So yeah, and it's okay if you don't remember all the words that you go through every day. What I would do is I would take screenshots of the words that I found really difficult, that no matter how many times I went through them, I just couldn't remember. And I made a small folder on my phone, and every night or morning, I would just go through them. So yeah, that's something that you can do.
Thank you. That's actually really helpful because someone has asked, how do you actually remember the meaning of so many words? So I think it's a good trick and answer that question. I'll take one question from chat and then I'll come to Pawandeep and Priya. Someone is asking how similar is the GRE to the CAT? Will CAT preparation help in GRE Quant and Verbal? If any one of you is familiar with that. Okay. That's fine.
My
Yeah,
sorry,
sorry.
my guess is, again, this is a guess. My guess is that CAT Quant will be a lot harder than GRE Quant. So that will cover the base. I'm not sure about English or the verbal part.
Yeah, maybe it would be good to look at some mock tests for both and sort of make a comparison of the difficulty level, and then in that sense you get an idea of whether CAT prep will help you with GRE. Pavandeep, you can ask your question now.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for taking the time out. I wanted to ask that the suggestion on we should decide 4 target institutions before taking the test. So is it okay if we have tentative 4 targets? Does it do any harm that after a while we have some different institutions in mind?
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, I had a list of 10 institutes 8 or 10 institutes that I wanted to apply to. I used four out of those, and I did not end up applying to 2 of them. So I did waste 2 of my options. So there's no harm to it. And your score will just go there. It will stay in their system. You don't have to apply. The other subtle nuance to this is if you're very keen on a certain institute, I would keep it out of the 4. The reason being that you may not perform as well as you thought on the exam, and you don't want to send that score to that institute. So there was one dream institute that I was very interested in, and I kept it out of those 4. Because as it is, I was applying to more than 4. So I thought I'll pay for that, but I'll send my score for free to these 4. So that was the strategy I used. But again, I did not apply to 2 of those. So I just wasted 2 options, and that's okay.
Yeah. What if we retake the test and then resend the score to that institution? Is that also fine?
I could be wrong here, but I remember they send every attempt that you take. So the institute does get both the scores. But again, if someone wants to correct me on that, don't quote me on that. ETS would have it on their website. Like what happens if you take it multiple times? Does it get sent? I think they send both the scores.
And it doesn't do any harm, lower our chances if the second score we are sending it the second time.
Again, it's very subjective. They would, if I were on the admission committee, I would probably take your best attempt because I'm, yeah, like.
I think that's mentioned also somewhere on your like I think on the ETS website or your college's website, like where you want to go, that they would definitely take your best score. So you don't have to worry about anything.
If you can't find any answer you're looking for, just write the institution you want to apply to. That is also a great way to figure out how they evaluate these things. They might reply, they might not reply, might not be helpful, but it is worth reaching out to them. If you have any questions, rather than keeping it to yourself and wondering, just shoot an email to them and you will most likely get a response. Admissions committees are generally very responsive.
Yeah, they have people who are only tasked with answering emails. So make sure you just write to them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Priya, do you want to ask your question now?
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
I just have 2 questions. My first question is if you have any advice for someone who hasn't done math for quite a bit of time and who has a weak mathematical foundation. And my second question is about the mock exam. You had suggested that we write a mock exam, right? But once we have written our mock exam, how should we place our target score? Like how much would be a feasible score increase and how much would be too much to even aim for? And thank you once again for all the questions answered. It's really helpful.
I can try to answer this. On how you should place yourself after you've taken your mock, I would say it would depend on the evaluation of your wrong answers. So don't take the score as the end all. Think of evaluate where you went wrong, and on the basis of that and as well on the amount of time you have. If you think that it was mostly things that are very remediable with just some tips on how to approach questions which are GRE specific, your score jump can be a lot more. But if you think that it is that you will have to go back to a lot of basic concepts and you are not comfortable with some aspects, then the score jump will be lesser. But don't let that scare you into either not attempting or or just dissuading you at any part during the application process, because it's like Balsher said, it is one very small component of the entire application process. So don't focus that much on where you think it can get to. Having said that, I think for me personally, I went from my very first mock attempt, with where I started before even giving the GRE, was like a 300 or something like that, I want to say. And then that went up to a 329 in my final, the final GRE that I gave. So that much of a jump is possible, just because there are certain questions where you just, when you do it timed, you tend to miss out on certain things, and there are some questions which you approach differently when you are studying them previously during your school versus when you're giving it on the GRE. So there are some very small tips and tricks that can help you change your score quite a bit.
And also, Priya, with regard to your question about someone who doesn't have a very strong math background, so when I gave the GRE, I mean, math is not my strong suit, and I think there was a 10-year gap between last when I studied math and when I gave GRE. So what I did was that before starting again, I also gave a mock test, and just to sort of gauge where I stand, with my quantitative abilities and aptitude. I realized that my main issue with answer. So what you should be doing is try to analyze why you can't answer the question. For me, it was that I had forgotten my basics. So I spent about 2 to 3 days just brushing up on basics, and I sort of like made I made flashcards with regard to basic formulas and just things like that. And I would just keep going through those. That really helped me because that sort of helped me answer questions better and prepare more thoroughly. So yeah, try to analyze why you can't answer your math questions. If it's something you don't understand, try to read up on that. If it's formulas that you can't remember, then try to make a sort of compendium or something of that sort. Yeah, but again, nothing to be scared of. Like it's not the end all. Not being good at math.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. When you said that you brushed up your math, how exactly did you do that? Did you use a particular resource?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I bought that Kaplan guide, that book. So it had chapter wise, given uh, uh, formulas and things like that. So, like before they came to practice tests, like for example, if I was doing geometry, um, before coming to the practice test, they sort of explain various formulas, like like in a right angle triangle and stuff like that, like what all goes where and basics. But again, I would recommend that you can Google it. Kaplan, it's something that worked for me, and I didn't refer to any other resource. So I would suggest you Google whatever is suitable for you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to move to a few questions in chat now. There's a question on sort of when to take the GRE. So the GRE takes place multiple times in a year. So after how much time gap can one retake the test? And is there a rule for it, or can we do it one after the other?
I'm not sure what they mean by one after the other, but you can take it multiple times as long as you're able to find a slot. Sometimes during September, October, you may not be able to find a spot in your city, so you may have to go to the neighboring city. I have no idea about the taking the test at home thing. Maybe that actually increases your options to take it more frequently. But I would say don't think about the second test, the second attempt. Just do it in the first attempt. It's honestly, it's just something you have to get out of the way. don't fret too much. I would just focus more time on your SOPs and your letters and recommendations and application. Yeah, don't worry too much about GRE. All professors know what the GRE means, right? And regarding maths not being your strong suit, I assume that you would be applying to a program where you will not use as much maths. So that will also be factored into the admissions committee, looking at your GRE score. So they won't just get your score out of 340. They will get a breakdown out of 170 each for the English and the maths part. So make sure you go through the institute or the department website and see what their minimum criteria is for each of the sections. They may have a very high criteria for the writing part, for example, if you're going into a program where writing is a big part of it. So make sure you know what you need to do before you sit for the exam. And yeah, like if you're not using maths, they know that. So they'll judge you accordingly.
And for the timeline for when to take the test, I did something similar to what Balsher said. It just, I gave the GRE first before even starting and thinking about my SOPs and reference letters, because that was a big separate chunk that I wanted to get out of the way. I gave it, my application cycle was around December, January was when the submission was. I started GRE prep in June and gave it around September. And then after that, I started the other documents. So, but it depends entirely on how much time you have, whether you have other work or study commitments going on. So you'll have to factor all of that into account.
And I gave my GRE and my TOEFL on the same weekend. So just just get it out of the way. Honestly, it's just something you have to do.
Yeah, that's actually what I also did. I just gave TOEFL, GRE one after the other because I wanted my entire focus after these exams to be only on my application and on things that mattered.
Great. Just to clarify one thing, I don't know if this is part of the question that you asked here, but for the GRE, you have to book your test. So these are not on scheduled days, but you have to find a slot for when you can take your test. And so it completely depends on your own schedule. And so you go on the sort of website and find a date that's close to when you want to take it, and you book that test on the portal. And then sort of you can take it as many times as slots are available, I guess, just in case, that wasn't clear.
Sorry, just once.
Yeah.
So, I would say in terms of booking the test, don't wait until you feel you are fully ready to give the test to book the slot. That is, I think, a very bad idea. Have a target date for your prep. You don't necessarily have to book the test before you start your prep, but have a target date, and a few weeks into your prep, you will have an idea of how it is going, but then book off the test. Because one, the slots are very difficult to find around the time, on the peak application time, and two, it helps you just anchor your prep because you will always feel like no amount of time is enough. So it gives you a final deadline to just sort of get it over with, and that is the unfortunate truth, and you have to do it that way.
Also, I wanted to add that between two consecutive GRE tests, I think there's a gap of 21 days, but I could be wrong. I would suggest that you Google it, but yeah, I think there is a gap of 21 days between two tests. As in, if you give one test today and you want to retake it, there has to be a gap of 21 days.
Okay, thank you. That is a good clarification. Another question that we have, Ashri Kartiki, I see your hand raised. So do you want to ask your question?
Hello, am I audible? Oh,
Yes.
thank you for the session. So my question is, how important is it to have a GRE score if it is not mentioned in the PhD application? And also if you could mention the average cost of the GRE process, like the exam fees and also sending the score and everything. Thank you.
I can speak to PhD. So I did my master's when I sent my GRE scores to all the institutes I was applying to, except for the one in Canada because they did not require it. And then during the PhD, when I was talking to my potential supervisors, I realized that the GRE doesn't really play a very big role in your PhD application. The university may require it. In that sense, you may have to sit for it and send it, but it's like probably it's like if you score a 290 on the GRE, then it's a problem. But if you score just anything above 320, I guess like they don't care, right? So it's more of like a minimum threshold rather than how much you need. And if the university requires it, the admissions committee has to adhere to those rules, even if they may not weight it in the application. So there are two things: talk to your potential supervisor, and if the university needs it, you have to sit for it. That's how the game is played. Again, it depends on your program as well. If it's not a very quant focused program, they may have a very lenient take on your quantitative skills. But yeah, always good to have as much information as possible. Talk to your potential supervisor in case of a PhD. Talk to the graduate admissions supervisor in your potential department. Yeah, gather as much information as you can and then just go for it. Does that answer your question, Karthiki?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
There was actually a question that you asked, Karthik, in chat, but I just for everyone who's sort of going to either watch the recording or, it might be helpful to know, is there a fee waiver on the GRE by any chance?
I think you can apply for, and I'm not entirely sure. And I think she also asked about the cost of the GRE and the average. I'm sorry, I think you will have to look that up exactly because I don't remember it now. Because I gave it 2 years ago. So I don't know if Juhi might have a better idea.
So I think you can apply for a fee waiver, but I'm not really sure how that works because I didn't do that. And I think GRE, I mean, you'll have to confirm with the ETS and just maybe Google it, but I think it took about $200 to give the test and about $15 to send it to institutions if you hadn't already availed the 4 free institutions that they give you. But again, please confirm with Google and ETS and everything because it could have changed now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. So Shiva, your hand raised, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I would like to ask you that whenever I practice essay, I could not. So when I try to do structuring of the essay, I do like I write rough work after the essay, and then I try to put down all the important points. But down the line, I've observed the way I write it. So when I write the structure, I only put the major points which comes to my mind while writing the essay, and I just write those structural points and somehow link it to through the linking words. But when I do not write the structure, like some questions, like some bullet points as a rough work for me, I do not remember things. Like conclusion goes up to the top, sometimes some points. So I mean, I'm just really confused that how shall I structure the points, because in half an hour one needs to think, and they need to structure it as well, and the grammar should also be right. So like, yeah.
So Toshiba, one advice that I can give you, because this is what I did, was that right off the bat, I would make sort of headings like introduction, para 1, para 2, and conclusion. Para 1, para 2, para 3, again, can change or increase, decrease, depending on how many points you feel you have. So what I used to do was I used to just put keywords that in my mind, like, which sort of triggered a memory that this is what I have to write. So I would just pick any word that would come to my mind and I would just sort of write those words in no order. Like in introduction, I would write 3-4 words, in para 1, 2, 3, and then same, and again then conclusion. And then when I used to start writing, so this process used to take me about 5 minutes. That's because I practiced so much that I sort of reduced it to 5 minutes so that then I could focus the 25 minutes or 20 minutes on just typing and then quickly going through my essay. uh, when you deal with each paragraph, then you see the words and see how you want to frame your sentences. Yeah, so that's what I did, because I would just go through all the words and then I would decide where I like which word or which sentence I would want to mention first. And you can try doing that. And a lot of times, even when I was writing, I would realize that para one, like the main body one, uh, would actually sound better if it was main body two and all of that. So again, don't worry and just, I would say, practice a lot. But yeah, this is one technique that I did. You can also try it if it works for you.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think like note taking in itself is actually a very big component of approaching the analytical writing, and 5 minutes is a good sort of timer. That's what I did as well, to limit your note taking to, which comes with practice. What I did was, of course, you should practice writing all your essays as much as you can, but towards the end, even if you don't have time to practice full essays, just practice the note taking, because it helps with thinking through points quicker, structuring them, and sometimes you can always spill over into different sort of essay topics. And there are actually very specific advices. I don't know if I looked it up on YouTube or if it was in the practice guides, but they give you different sort of ways to structure your notes for different kinds of essay topics. So if it is something that requires you to analyze a for and against argument, they give you tips on how to actually structure your note in a specific way with 2 columns and everything. So they have different structures for different types of questions, which might help with this, because otherwise it looks like a jumble of different words. So just try to look that up.
Can I ask one more concern?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, I'm really very apprehensive. I've just passed out and I did social work, and I feel that I don't have a very good connection with my faculties at college, because I mean, I wasn't a very good student in academics and I don't know how good I was at fieldwork. So, I mean, that's a very big concern whenever I start studying for any exam, like for references, I am concerned.
Maybe I can take this question. So I think one is the application process is different from the GRE test, and I understand that your concerns are sort of related to the application and sort of all of the material that you need to make your application. I think sometimes one is, I think you should approach your professors and actually have a chat with them and see if they also share that. Sometimes we think in our own head that we probably want a good student, but our professors have noticed us, and they do have things to say about us. So I would suggest maybe have a conversation with your professors once, tell them your situation, tell them that, you're applying for a certain program, and what you want to do. And I think that might be helpful, and keep them in the whole application process loop so they know what you're doing. I think, yeah, that's my suggestion on, finding a recommendation letter. And I think maybe if you feel like that's stopping you from actually taking the test or performing well in it because you're constantly thinking about this, maybe have that conversation first, figure out what all you need, and if you are sort of prepared, and if you feel more relaxed after having those conversations, then maybe you can, then pay attention to the test. And as sort of everyone has been saying, it might be actually first helpful to see if you actually need to take the test, and if there are programs that you're doing where maybe it's not a mandatory requirement, but it may be recommended, or maybe it's not mentioned at all. So then you can just write to them asking that, if I don't take the GRE and submit a score, would that be detrimental to my application? So maybe do all of those things before you actually sit to take the test. I think
Thank you
that's
so
what I
much.
would recommend.
Thank you.
Great. I do realize that we are very close to uh, the scheduled time of ending the session. If it's okay with the three of you, if you can stay on for maybe 5-7 more minutes, and then we can quickly take some questions. I know, Palak, you've asked. Sorry.
It's just something I thought of while you were talking. It's not related to the question, but I would say spend like the last few days of your prep thinking about the actual test day in terms of logistics as well. Because that day you will probably be under stress and pressure, and you don't want logistics to catch you off guard. So preferably try and speak to someone if you know who was given the test recently, just to ask about the actual logistics of the test, or call up your test center and ask them. Think about how you're gonna get there, how much in advance you wanna get there. It is cold in the test center. Carry a jacket. It tends to affect your performance a lot. So just spend some time thinking about these things for sure. Don't leave them until the very last minute, because those are the small things that make a lot of difference on test day.
And this may sound dumb. Like, this is the dumbest thing that you could think of, but I had a friend who prepared very well for the exam, and on the day of the exam, he ended up at the test center. He did not bring his passport with him. And they do not let you sit for the exam without the passport. You may have 10 different IDs, at least then they did not let you sit for it without your passport. So he just had to reschedule it for an extra fee. So yeah. And he was a smart fellow, I can assure you.
Sometimes the nerves really get to you. I'm going to quickly sort of just ask some broad questions that will hopefully answer the questions that everyone's asked individually. Just on online resources, say are worth buying. Also maybe referring to mock tests, do you think it's worth buying some of them? And if you have suggestions on which one.
I didn't buy any resource. Like, I spent not even one penny on any resource. Other than the official GRE fees, the guide, I was able to find a version. I'm not sure if it was the latest version or not, but I was able to find a version online that was not that I didn't have to pay for, which was still the official guide. And for test resources, I used the Manhattan guide for quant and Magoosh for vocab. These were, I also narrowed down, and these were the two I used, not for necessarily the questions, but for the approach to each question and understanding strategies. These are the two I used. And then I just used the GRE Prep Club website, which is free, and it just pulled, because it pulled all the questions from different sort of resources, and I could even narrow down my resources there. I didn't end up buying any resource. So, but that is a very subjective decision that I think you can take.
I like for mock tests and all, I really like the £5 GRE mock test. It's by Manhattan Prep. So when I was done with all my preparation and everything, that was the only book that I referred to for my mock tests and everything. So yeah, that worked for me. And other than that, I relied on free resources like Magoosh, YouTube videos, and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah, those free mock tests are great, but do remember that they want you to pay for something. So those mock tests may actually be a bit on the harder side. So for example, for me, my best performance, my best score was actually when I gave the exam. All the mock tests, I scored less than that. So don't worry if you think you're not doing well on the mock exams. As long as you see some improvement, that is more critical than the absolute score that you see.
Okay. There's actually a very specific question about the score for LSC. So maybe Namita, you can answer that. Which is would there be any difference for someone who scored a 320 versus a 330 at LSC?
I wish I could know what the admissions committee wanted, but it depends a lot on the course you are applying for, because LSC is so like such a large university with so many different departments. Each department has their own requirement, and within each department, every course has its own requirement. The course I applied for, the Master of Public Administration, for the GRE wasn't even mandatory; it was just recommended. But I still gave it, and my score was a 329, and that was good. I know people in my batch who didn't give the GRE. But I would say it's similar to what Balsher said. Depending on what course you are applying for, I think beyond a certain threshold, it doesn't matter what the exact score is. Put it in the context of your overall profile, and don't fret too much about a few points of an increment between a 320 or a 330. I don't think you should think about it. Definitely don't spend too much time taking a second test, because it is valuable time you can dedicate to other parts of your application process. If you still are concerned about it, write to the college, and they will be the best person to answer a specific question for the course. But I highly doubt that it would significantly affect your application.
Great. I think for those who have your hand raised, I think I see your questions in chat as well. For the question on taking the GRE to sort of compensate for a lower CGPA, I think Balsher has answered, but for those who are going to be watching the recording, he says that it does, sort of taking the GRE does compensate sometimes for the lower CGPA, but again, no one knows what specifically with admissions committee. Does anyone want to add anything to that, Juhi?
Yeah, because the admission committee does not know how your specific college or university grades you, right? It could happen that everyone is graded like a score of 9 is average in your institute, or a score of 7 is the norm, right? So GRE in that way is a good standardizing test. Like, I have been very critical of it throughout this workshop, but that is the one thing that GRE does help with. Everyone gets a standardized score. That being said, even in your SOP, you will get a chance to explain your CGPA, right? So don't worry if your CGPA is low or a specific course you really did badly on it. You will get a chance to explain that. Again, a GRE does help you if your CGPA is low. And you don't know if your CGPA is low, to be honest. Let the admission committee decide that.
Yeah, so this was actually a concern of mine as well when I was applying to Columbia, that I feared that my CGPA wasn't as good. So what I did was, I mean, of course, I went through their website and everything, and the admissions committee specifically said that they don't look at any one particular thing, and they view your application very holistically. So a lot of things do matter: your essays, your letters of recommendation, your scores, and everything. But again, it entirely, like, there's not one particular thing that they're hung up on. So I would suggest that don't worry and try to do the best to your ability.
Great. I know there have been a few questions about timeline, and I know all of you have sort of responded to this throughout the presentation, but I'll sort of quickly say that I think the recommendation is 3 to 4 months. Start preparing in advance, but if you take a mock and you realize that you may not need as much time, or you need more time, that will be sort of the benchmark for how much time you need. I'm just saying this because, for people who are watching the recording may not have access to the chat. So I'll take one last question from Palak, and then we can end the session. Palak, do you want?
Hello, am I audible?
Please go ahead.
Okay, firstly, thank you so
Yes.
much for helping all of us out. I'm sure everyone here appreciates it. I have this question regarding the 4 institutions we send our scores to. So, actually, I was thinking that once I get the scores, and depending on that, I can think about which institutions it would be best to send my scores to. So that decision I might not be able to take at the test center itself. Is it possible that I can give it later on? And if I'm giving it later on, will the free facility vanish? What? How did you guys go about it? Could you let me know?
So maybe I can take that one. Palak, I gave, when I registered for the GRE, they said that just before, like, I think the night before the day of my test, they told me that I would have to register for 4 institutions where I would be sending in my scores for free. So that is a facility that they tell you that you have, like they give it to you a day before, and also during the exam time, you also have an option, like once you're done with your test, you can send it to institutions of your choice, but that is just for free. There is no hard and like there is no stopping you from, like, if you want to share it to other institutions as well after you've given the exam, but you will have to pay for it. So I think it's about $15 per institution. But again, you can confirm that online. But yeah, that's what, like, it was my experience.
And I totally don't remember the order that this happened in, but they also give you a tentative GRE score right when you finish it. But I'm not sure if it happens before you give those 4 institutions or does it happen afterwards. So that can also help you decide. Also, the 4 institutions, don't just go in there with the name of the institutes. Make sure you know the code of the department or whatever. Like, GRE is very, very standardized in the sense that they have made a list of all the institutions that accept GRE. And within some institutions, they also have department codes. So I remember when I was applying, for some of the universities, I only had to provide the institute code, but for some other programs, I also had to supply the program code, which could include the department code as well as the course code, in the sense that masters had a different code than PhD, and that was then. So it can be very hard and difficult to understand, but it's just one way to save some money, because you get those 4 for free, and I'm not sure if they allow you to do it after you leave the test center. So again, ETS is your best source of information on this. It changes so rapidly.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Perfect. I've answered your question in chat about GRE for scholarships. In most cases, I don't think scholarships require a GRE score, but if it is required, then it would be very clearly mentioned on their website. But in most cases, it's not required. Okay, I think we're quite so we're way past time, so I think we'll stop here now. Just before I thank our panelists, I'm going to mention that I have put links for the resources that were mentioned today in chat. Just to let you know, the recording of this session will also be available on our YouTube channel, and I have linked the YouTube channel in chat. We'll try to upload the PPT that we presented today in the form of a Google Drive that will be in the description of the YouTube channel. So sort of the video, so you can have a look at that. We've also at Project EduAccess done a number of sessions on different university applications and scholarship applications. You can find the recording of those sessions and PPTs that were used in those sessions on our website. I put a link to that as well. And for those who are watching the recording, you will find it in the description of the video. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us today, and thank you for asking your questions. Thank you so much, Juhi, Namita, and Balsher, for taking the time out, for staying on, for preparing the PPT, and for answering the questions. We really do appreciate your time and effort. Thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice weekend, rest of the day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.